We're live. Rich, welcome to the show.
Greg, man, thanks for having me. Just saw you. Just saw that face. Just saw like it was like
Yes,
looking in a mirror in real
I
life.
know. Yeah, we've been mistaken for the same person several times, actually. Um, Funnily enough, in Chicago, the one in Chicago, one of the head judges came over and was like, "Rich." I was like, "No, no, I'm not Rich."
You should try to let it roll and see if like the accent and like they're like, I didn't think that's how we talked, but who knows? Maybe it sound different in person.
When I start running, they'd realize. Um, so let's start. Let's start with we saw each other in Washington, where you got your spot for the World Championships. Well done, congratulations.
Thank you.
Um, I guess that race meant a lot, right?
Was that?
I guess it meant a lot to you, that race.
Yeah. I mean, to perform well is always great, right? To get on a podium, to qualify to worlds, it's always a good feeling, right? But the how hard it's been and how hard this race is really what meant a lot. Like again, the place is fine, but really being able to put together a race that I'm proud of, it means that means more. And that's what something that upon my reflection of the race is something that I connected with a little bit more is that like I knew this was going to be a tall order. I knew it was going to be really hard, and I did everything in my ability to make something like this happen. So like being able to achieve a goal, and especially when it's so challenging, that's what feels great. The results are the results, right? Like there's only so much I can do about the outcomes, but like the feeling of executing across like several weeks of training and have my mind right and having physically come together, like that's what I feel great about.
Yeah, yeah, good. I can imagine. Like, I've followed you for a long time, and you were on this podcast 18 months ago. It was actually,
Early.
and obviously,
Was that like
yeah,
I was like, was there even a podcast then?
yeah, just about, just about. You were one of the first to come on, and we talked about like it was before I was talking to many of the elites, so we talked about how fast the elites can run and how
Mm-hmm.
much they can lift and all that sort of stuff. So it was the first conversation that we had about that. Um, but obviously, like you missed out on the World Championships in Manchester, like the elite race, and it feels like you've known for a long time, like you can get to that stage and compete at that stage, and like just haven't had the race come together for you and like the right course and everything like that. So yeah, it was. I was really pleased for you on Friday. It felt like a long journey you'd been on to get to that point. You know.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And like, yeah, when you think about it from that context, it seems like every race I've run since Worlds and Vegas has been
Mm.
trying to get back to this place. And there's always been like this pressure and like this weight of every single race. So yeah, to have it be able to come together and be able like to race these awesome athletes is really all I can ask for. And it's gonna be great to be back there. But now I get to prep again, which is like my favorite thing to do. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah. When did you during the race on Friday night? Was there a certain point where you were like you knew this was on?
So I was running around after the sled push. I think it was like the first lap after the sled push. My buddy Luca Lorenzoni, he was standing in like the warm up area, and he yells like, "You're 13 seconds back from first." And I thought in my head, my thought was like, "I can win this race." I was like, "I'm right here. I've never been in this position after the sled push where 13 seconds. Like, if I wanted to make that up in one run, I could. It wouldn't be smart to do that, but like it's right there." And I was like, "Okay, I'm here." But I knew that I had like the back half of the race is really where I needed to kind of focus and make sure that I was mentally buckled down. And before the race, I told myself like there's 28 minutes approximately after the burpee broad jumps for the rest of the race. And I was like, if I can sit and suffer and really hang in there for 28 minutes, I can do that. So I didn't. So it felt good after the sled push. I was like, oh my god, I'm in a good spot. But I knew it was a long, I knew it was a long journey. And those last 28 minutes were rough. Like I got on the row, I was like, this is not what I want to do. Like I picked up the farmer's carry. I was like, this is not great. But I still was able to just kind of hang in there. And my running was coming along well after each station. And really, I thought the entire time I need to get top five. Right. That was the kind of the story going into the race. Like only two athletes are qualified here, Pelayo and Ryan Kent. So there's probably whoever finishes like in the top five will probably go. There's three spots available. I didn't realize that like I knew what place I was in, but I didn't realize that top five wouldn't go if Pelayo and Ryan weren't in front of me. and they weren't at that point. And then I was like, oh my God, I need to get third going into wall balls. So I wouldn't say I ever really felt like I had it, but I knew things were going well after that push.
Yeah, yeah,
Have you crunched the numbers on the push yet for like
no.
how like across the opens? It'd be interesting to see how it plays out against Vienna
You
for
mean
the.
sled push times Vienna versus Washington?
Yeah, I mean elites for sure. They're always gonna be like pretty fast, but the open waves to see if like the new equipment, how much that changed.
Yeah, I did it for the first week. So in Fort Lauderdale, the men's open looked like it was about, I think it was, I want to say 50 seconds quicker than
5-0.
yeah.
Wow.
Then the average had been in America
Oh,
up to that point. I mean, that was admittedly a quick look, I need to check. I'm not convinced Washington was as quick as Fort Lauderdale. So it might have just been like literally first time use of that new equipment made it particularly fast.
maybe it gets scraped up a little bit and it slows down. Did you get a chance to push them?
Yeah, only in the warm up area. Yeah, it felt pretty nice. I thought.
The sleds are just nicer.
Yeah,
You know, like they're balanced, like the weight is balanced better. Like there's like texture on the poles, you know,
yeah,
so you're not kind of sliding them. They're just like, it's just nicer equipment now. So, I mean, it's definitely going to factor in one way or another.
yeah. It feels
But
very
yeah,
nice. It feels very quality, and it is quite different. You said about like the weight distribution. I looked, and it is like it's 50 kilograms that the sled weighs, which is whatever over 100 pounds.
what is it?
Yeah,
You think so? That's
it
way
is
heavier, isn't it?
because I remember seeing in the first like Fort Lauderdale they only had like 4 plates on it. And I was like,
You're right.
how's that work? And so they had to get it to 150. And yeah, on the website where they're selling it, it says 50 kilograms.
Wow. Because what the old one I thought was closer to like 50 pounds, right? Like 60 pounds,
Uh, yeah, 25, 30
which is,
kilograms.
yeah,
So yeah,
30
yeah,
kilos. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Wow.
quite
So
a
that
big
much
difference.
heavier. Huh.
Mm,
Huh.
mm,
So that's going to factor in this too. Like the stack of the plates matters some, but
yeah,
it's just what we got. It's just like the sport we got.
yeah. How was the, while we're talking about the new equipment, how was the rope? Because I felt when I tried it, I was like, wow, that is going to be slippery. You're going to need a lot of chalk for that.
I figured it would be slippery, just knowing how these ropes kind of come out of the factory. And those will break into to a certain point. They're probably really stiff too. I wear gloves. I pack gloves in
Oh,
my pocket. I had a race early in my HYROX career where the rope was like I had bad shoes and my grip wasn't right, and it was just slipping on both ends. So, and since every race I've ever had to run, freaking since I've started running this thing, had some sort of major implications. I was like, I'm not dealing with, I'm not taking that risk. So I put gloves in my pockets and take them out after sled push and put them on in the run and then take them off right after the pull. So for me, it was fine, but Kent was having issues. Kent mentioned after that, like it was kind of slipping on him. But the time seemed okay, right?
mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah,
there was some pretty
yeah,
fast, like a couple people 3.0s, a bunch of people 3.20s.
yeah,
So that didn't
yeah,
seem to
yeah.
affect it too much.
No. I'm glad you mentioned the gloves actually, because I had Pelayo on last week and I meant to ask him about the gloves. So what are you just using it for sled pull, and also what gloves do you use? I think people might be interested.
So in my first HYROX event, I wore the gloves throughout. It was in Orlando, Florida, I think in April, and it was way too hot, and I was like sweating so hard. By the time I got to the farmer's carry, my hands were so soaked. The gloves were completely soaked through. I had to take the gloves off. My hands were still so wet that my farmer's carry ended up being like 4 minutes or something crazy. So I realized like, okay, this is not the way to do it. So I actually wear wide receiver gloves for American football. You know, you could maybe wear goalie gloves. I don't know if that would work. Probably not. Not that familiar with it. But
No,
like
that'd
some
be
sort of
super
ski,
hot. But yeah.
just like huge Mickey Mouse gloves. The so like a wide receiver glove, it's like a texture. It has like a tackiness to it. So that's what I use. Pelayo, I believe, wears like gardening gloves. That still has like a rubber. Like the palm is rubber, so I think that you can get a bit of a better grip. I like the idea of gardening gloves because they're lighter. You know, so he carries it in like a little spy belt, like a little runner fanny pack. That would probably be easier to manage, and they're cheaper. Like I lost my gloves this week they're like $15, but I take them off and I throw them. Sometimes I'm thinking about where I'm putting them, and then I just like don't go get them after the race. So I think garden goes would be good. I just worry that it wouldn't be tight around the wrist. Like it might kind of pull and slide, but if they're tight, if they're snug enough, I think they would work fine. But yeah, I wore ones that have like a Velcro across the wrist.
Okay. Okay. So this Washington race was just 3 weeks after the Vienna race, which didn't go well for you. We talk about jet lag a lot in this sport. Do you feel like it? Would you just put that performance like I think you finished 13th in Vienna? Would you just put that down to jet lag, or was there anything else you think?
Yeah, thank you for not saying last, because other people dropped out.
People dropped out, exactly.
But I'm last in the freaking results. I got to get some DNFs on there. I need to send a note up. But like it was a little bit that, but like I don't think I was prepared for the intensity of it. It was my first race since Chicago, so it was a bit of a build. And I was focused pretty heavily on volume and just like aerobic capacity and muscular endurance and just building up this big base so that the race itself, like the duration of it, was manageable. And then in that race of Vienna, like the intensity was higher than I anticipated. And like this isn't my first race, I should know that, but it like didn't feel very comfortable. And I don't think it was because of the jet lag on that point. I think that was just being prepared. So I did put in a couple of workouts pretty aggressive in like the 2 weeks between, just to really ramp things up. So I'd be a little bit more familiar with how things were going to feel. But at the same time, it has some sort of factor, right? Like we got in on Thursday morning. So we flew over Wednesday overnight. So it was like a full day of sleep just gone, right? So we get in Thursday morning, nap a little bit, then sleep again that night, and that went fine. And so I didn't physically feel tired. Like there wasn't like sleepiness there, but there's got to be something with the nervous system that is not quite, that isn't all intact, right? That there's some fatigue that is outside of just like feeling sleepy, tired, that there's not just like that. There's that pop isn't there. Everything felt like a little bit harder. Felt like I was going as fast as I could, but like I was not moving the way that I would typically be able to move. So I think there's some time that needs to be there to kind of get that nervous system back on track. From the people I talk to, I have a couple friends who actually work in like a medical setting around sleep and performance. And he was telling me it's like a week. Like it takes a week to truly adjust. And we went over there, we're optimistic about our fitness and optimistic that we can kind of get it done with just like that one night and just being able to sleep well overnight. Because I don't know what your experience typically is from this travel, but like the first night of sleep seems okay for me, at least going west to east. That second night isn't good. And like my whole time in Vienna and Austria, like I didn't sleep well because I was just like up too late, and then I would I couldn't be up late enough, and like it just didn't go well the nights after that first one. So we were hopeful that with one good night's sleep, we'd be able to kind of turn it around and just kind of will it to happen. So, I mean, percentage of what blame I would give that, of why the race went poorly, I think it was mostly in preparation for my body and mind, but the sleep had like, I don't know, 20%. Like it matters. It definitely mattered some.
So two questions on that. One, have you thought about what you're going to do with Nice? Are you going to get there a week early?
I'm starting to think about it now, Greg. I wasn't thinking about it before, but since Friday, I'm thinking about it a lot. Yeah, I think like at least a week. If we can get there even earlier, that'd be great. We're thinking about, and like not even needing, like Nice is like seems like a pretty cool, fun, desirable area to go to. So that makes it a little bit more expensive. So we're thinking about trying to find somewhere that's not Nice, maybe somewhere in the UK. We've been looking at like areas outside of like Dublin and outside of London that like, maybe a little bit outside the city that we can stay. It's a little bit more affordable just to acclimate to the time. Mm-hmm. We don't need to be in France to acclimate to that. And then once we're over there, we'll probably just take like a quick flight over. Like the flights are way more affordable from country to country in Europe once we're there. So I think that's going to be the plan. I mean, we've been talking about as much as 2 weeks just to not have it be a factor at all. But again, that's like a bit excessive, definitely pricey. So if we can figure out a way to make it work, like we're going to try to be like at least a week.
Okay. All right, cool. And then on the intensity part, because I've seen you mention the intensity um, somewhere else, but do you feel like that is just something that you needed more intensity for a couple of weeks leading up to the race, or is it something that you felt like should have been in your plan for like long term and it was just missing?
So I mentioned like that 28 minutes, right? Like I know I can
Mm-hmm.
hang on for this 28-minute piece. And I was not confident that I could hang on for 58 minutes, right? So like having a bit more time with the intensity to build the volume around it, I think would have given me more, a little more confidence to race aggressively the entire time. Would now it was kind of a little bit like manage, make sure you're in a place that you know you can sustain, and then push beyond what like you can do, but just for a short amount of time, right? And like so, if I would have had that in place for, I would probably put it in place for 4 to 6 more weeks. I'm working on my plan right now. For what I'm going to do for Nice, like this week is a bit of a down week. Next week's going to be kind of similar, kind of building back up. But I'm probably going to put in, yeah, 6 to 7 weeks of specific intensity, and then if I'm able to layer on the volume on top of that, is and build the volume into the intensity. Where I kind of did it the opposite this past time, which I think would be a good way to do it if I had like 16 weeks. But before Vienna, I had like 6, right? And I just went for the volume side because it's a long kind of season. And that's generally where I've fallen short in this event. But now that I have a decent base of the muscular endurance stuff, of the aerobic side, I can now give myself more time to work to progress the volume and that intensity. So yeah, I think like 6-7 weeks is probably needed.
Okay. I've had a similar experience myself. Like I remember before the Birmingham race, I did like this mini sim only like a week before, and I was like, oh, I've not had that feeling enough in my training. Like it was and it weren't necessarily just intensity. It was intensity for enough period of time. So I'd been doing like some interval work, but then getting a 60-90 second rest
Mm,
and then doing it again. And like I remember in the sim, I was like almost craving that rest. And
mm,
it got me thinking ever since then that like you've got to be careful of taking out too much. There's so much talk about like zone 2 and volume work and everything around like training at the moment, but you do have to be and like not doing too many sims and not doing too much intensity all the time. But there is a balance, right? And you have to be careful about taking out too much intensity and not doing enough HYROX work. And it's probably like where you are in the season and where you are relative to your race. But yeah, it sort of resonated with me when you said you hadn't done enough intensity. I was like, yeah, I
uh-huh.
can imagine that feeling. Yeah.
Well, there gets to a point, right, when of where you are in like your high rocks progress, like up front, like if you're just getting started, like the totality of the race is a lot, right? And just completing it in
Mm-hmm.
any fashion in like any type of sustainability and sustainable like effort, like you need to just like have the volume there. You need to have the muscular endurance there. You need to spend time on your feet and just to build that aerobic capacity. And as that starts to become less of a factor, then like the intensity can kind of start ramping up.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think it's going to work if you're coming in early, if you go intensity first and then try to build it, just because
Yeah.
you're muscularly not going to be able to handle that. So, yeah, it really depends on like where you are. And that's where you got to tighten the screws a little bit more and more. And it's seeming now at the elite side of things, it's almost just high end from the start. Like these guys are going hard from the very beginning. Like the ski erg times, or the ski erg effort that people are putting out, I averaged like 146 high and was 13th in this last race. And that's like faster than my Deca ski, right? And Deca ski is like 500 meters.
Yeah.
Um, so like now it's becoming less about surviving and more about sticking your high end and being able to hold that for an hour, like just about an hour. Where there's where I think there's times like there's place for building volume, building zone 2, and then seeing how that kind of plays out for you, and then trying to splice in the intensity. But the volume needs to come first, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. You've talked about it already. Well, you just touched on it, but like sitting in that uncomfortable place for like 28 minutes and just I think when you were on this podcast last time, you said you just it's kind of an acceptance. You sit in that uncomfortable place, you accept it, not trying to judge it. Are you? Is that still the approach that you would take in a race when it's uncomfortable?
You know, Greg, I forgot that. That's something that when my mindset is right, I understand. When I am trying to, there's times that I try to out fitness this thing where I'm like, if I can make this easier by changing my form this way or by changing my rep scheme this way. I'm sure everybody listening who's doing wall balls is trying to figure out like, should I do 10s? Should I do 20s? Should I do 50 and then whatever? And really the answer is like, you just need to accept like it's going to be awful and that you can do that and that you can sit in it and you're capable of doing it. And that is what the intensity really did for me, is helped me understand that I was capable of being miserable for a long time. And that was just something that I lost while I was trying to be comfortable, right? Like I wanted this to be more comfortable than it is, and it's just not reality of the event. So that's something that happens with my mindset sometimes. I come in and out of that understanding that like, hey, this is going to suck and it needs to suck, but you're capable of doing that. So I forget sometimes, man. But yeah, I remember by the end, especially after the Vienna, I was like, okay, like, if this is going to come down to a test of toughness, and that's something that is like just controllable by effort, like I got to be able to be there. Like sometimes, like the fitness part is like what I want it to really come down to. But at a point, everybody's fit, and it just needs to be like who's willing to do the things that they don't want to do. And then when all that's even, like if I can come out of the race and feel happy with what I did, if I'm no matter what place I come, if I like sit in it and do things that I didn't want to do in the moment.
Okay. Um, Changing the subject a little, like we've obviously had all the majors so far. Well, all the majors this season. We've still got last chance qualifiers. How are you feeling about the overall setup, like in hindsight? Now we've had those four majors. Do you quite like the setup? Are you happy now you're qualified?
It's the greatest setup ever, man. It's kidding me. I'm good to go. This is no problems on my end. So like, yeah, it's a great question. I want to hear your take on this too. So, um, the way that the majors are shaking out and being able to qualify your way in through racing, that's what I want. I want to be able to step on the line and be able to earn a spot. So from that perspective, yes, it's like what a sport should be, right? That to me is fair. What to me is still not fair is how to get into these majors, based off of just inconsistency of courses, inconsistency of opportunities. And if we like the way that this system's set up, it didn't play out this way. And I don't know if it was by design. I can't imagine it was. But there's a world that I don't make a single major. Pelayo doesn't make a single major. Dylan Scott doesn't race this last major. Athletes who are outside of like the actual 15 are not guaranteed to get a spot to try to race for their position, right? The way that it just happened with roll downs and just the way that qualifiers kind of came about, it didn't matter. But like Dylan, he was probably thinking of the last chance qualifier. As far as I know, he was thinking of last chance qualifier before this race, where he came in. Now he's the North American champ in a dominating race, right? And Pelayo, same way. Like he got in the 30th position, comes out, gets fourth, and two more races gets second. So there's like the qualification to get into the majors. I still don't like that it's time based, and I don't think that that's fair. But the way the races are playing out and the way that they're doing the top 5 roll down, I think that all works really well. When you look at the athletes in there, it seems like this iOS. It seems like that's what we want it to be. Greg, the breakdown: North American athletes versus European-based athletes who are qualified for Worlds. Do you know what it is right now?
Fairly even.
6-6. If you like, because Pelayo counts as North American-based.
Right.
So we're getting more athletes. We're getting the right split as well. So it seems like it's working. What are you thinking about it?
Similar, like it seems like it's working because there's been roll downs, and whether that's would something that would always happen, whether you'd have so many roll downs in future seasons, I guess remains to be seen. Um, it's hard to like think of other solutions to get into the majors unless they ran sort of similar to last chance qualifiers more regularly for the majors. But then that comes with its own challenges, and live streaming and everything like that becomes more difficult. I think probably one thing that I don't necessarily agree with is how many auto qualifiers there have been for
Mm.
for the majors. Like I appreciate that some, like, last year's world champion should probably be auto qualified for the majors. Whether there should be 7 people auto qualified based on regionals and everything like that, I'm not so sure, because that then reduces number of opportunities to even qualify based on time. And I'm not sure, I might be wrong here, but I'm not sure any man was able to qualify based on time for the Washington race if there'd been no roll downs, because
If there've
they'd
been no roll
already
downs.
been, yeah, because
Yeah.
they'd auto qualified either for a previous season or through a major already this season.
Yeah.
And I suspect that the reason that they're doing it is to help these athletes find sponsors, and it's easier to go to a sponsor and be able to say, I'm going to be in all the majors this year and it's guaranteed. That makes it a hell of a lot easier to get sponsorship, I suspect. But in terms of fairness for the other athletes, like trying to knock on the door, it makes it a lot harder.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And like, but that's, it goes both ways, right? Like the athletes who caught like I caught not a qualifier on a roll down in Chicago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I had beaten, I came in, I don't know, I was the second to last seed, I think, third to last seed. So I beat like 9 or 10 dudes who had faster times than I did, right? So based on like the effort put in that day, that shows that I should get in these races before these other athletes who had these times that like were on different courses that I was on. So like I get it, like, and having these autos makes it real hard for someone who's not already in the sport. So bringing in new talent and like showing them this system that is basically like, oh yeah, this guy's in because he did something 10 months ago. This person's in because of a race that was a year ago. Like it's really challenging to bring in new athletes. So I don't think that, like, yeah, that's not really fair. But like the time versus the autos, it's, I don't know. Cause I really don't want time to be part of this thing at all. I think it'd just be like thrown out. I think there should be like how these last chance qualifiers are going to be at regular races, right? I think that should be how we qualify into North American championships, right? Like LA and New York is a qualifier. Top 5 in those races go, and then there's some sort of time after that. So you get like 10 guys in there already. And if someone from the UK wants to come over to qualify, they have to run New York first, and then have to come back over to race whatever it is, Chicago. I'd like to see something like that is a little bit more, you can race your way all the way through, like how we see in track and field or in the marathon. Like you have the opportunity. And right now the number is what is, because the argument against it's like, oh, well, like they take different courses in something like Kona or in the marathon, right? But like the fields are way bigger. They're not capped at 15, like where a minute over the course of an Ironman is like really not that big of a deal. But over the course of a HYROX, like it matters. So I would like to see him do it with time, but it's been fun, man. And the way that they're doing these broadcasts, it's been amazing. So like on your end, like the development that's happening, it seems like rapid. Like,
Yeah.
you guys just like having ideas and implementing them right away? Like, what's that been like on your end to like see this thing like really gain momentum?
Yeah, it's cool actually. Like you can see just the mentality. I think within HYROX is just to constantly be better. Like, and I notice at events as well, especially in the UK, that it feels like they try and do something at each event to be better than the last one. And that might be like the stand around the wall balls, or just the way that they're setting up. There definitely seems that mentality of like constant improvement. And I'm noticing it on the live stream as well. Just even if it's like some of the graphics, they're like, right, let's put in this graphic this time, and like they're like, I think working with a production company to get more cameras and more people working on it, and everything. There's this like constant improvement mentality. And it's been cool. It's been cool to be part of, because you see it sort of firsthand. And now I was watching it earlier. I know I'm biased because I was on it, but I was watching it earlier, and it was like it was brilliant. Like the
Really
races were so
good.
excited, the way they're shooting it, everything was great. So yeah, it's cool. It's cool. And I think like
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not involved in like tons of sports, like especially like ones this size, but I think in reality, for the size of the sport, the quality of the broadcast is very, very good. I suspect there's sports with more than whatever it is 150,000 people competing that have nothing like this. So we are quite fortunate, I think.
And then yeah, like the mentality of improvement is something that I am appreciating more and more. Like coming from OCR, have you done? You didn't really do OCR, right?
No, no, not really. No.
Like I was worried. Like there's two companies, like the company and it's Spartan Race, right? And like whatever they decide is like what we all have to deal with, and they did not have that mindset. So I was worried that there was going to be a lot of parallels. Just I don't know, like when you get to that point in business, maybe you have to see things a certain way. But
Mm-hmm.
they are really making an effort to make it better. I was even seeing a clip of like an old race that was in Dallas a couple of years ago, and it was like their premier event in like I think 21, and just like the look of the actual venue looked
Mm-hmm.
night and day. Like the
Yeah,
actual in event is improving too, and that's something that I would take for granted and not necessarily notice because it's probably small changes over the course of 2 years. Yeah, man, they're making it happen. We're
yeah,
fortunate to have them.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, so I want to talk about training a little bit. Your thoughts around training, and uh, well, one question I was going to ask: have you changed your thoughts on training, like maybe since the last time we spoke? If do you think about training for HYROX any differently to maybe what you used to? And then maybe a similar question is: if you look at like Dylan winning at the
Mhm.
weekend and looking so strong, whereas he's one of like the weaker physically athletes, does that change your thought process anymore around training for HYROX? Like if you think like Hunter's one of the the best athletes in the sport, and he is, but it's easy to think, well, you've got to be very, very strong and very, very fit to do this. I wonder if like seeing Dylan's performance changes that view at all, whether you've got any thoughts around that.
I mean, Dylan's always been a bit of an inspiration from this standpoint of being
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, you don't have to do it. You don't have to be what what Hunter is or what some of these other athletes are out here. Like you can do it your own way. And if that's something you believe in, that you will get good results, right? Like Dylan's made the choice. He's like, I'm just gonna outwork everybody. I'm just gonna put in a ton of volume and then I'm gonna put in a bunch of intensity. And I'm just gonna sit there and do the work that people don't do. It's like I don't have to gain 15 pounds of muscle so I look like the rest because then I'll race like the rest. He's out there doing his own thing. So like I felt that way about him for a while. So I've used him as a bit of uh, kind of a reference point when I am thinking about how to change things and what to do. Because he does get these type of results and he's been getting it. I mean, he's been second in North American championships twice and now he's won it. So he's not like this is new, right? He's been doing this for a long time, but he does it in a way that I think is only going to work for him or someone who has that very similar mindset. So it goes both ways, right? It's like you see Dylan and you're like, oh, well, like maybe you don't have to be a big, strong beast to do this, but also he trains for like 25, 30 hours a week. And that's another trap to kind of go into instead of being like, oh, let me follow the Hunter route. Let me follow the Dylan route. So really, I think it's about figuring out where it is that is going to make the most sense for the individual athlete and kind of either leaning into the strengths or developing some on top of some weaknesses. My ideas around this have changed. They change basically like weekly. Like I like it's so new. I'm trying to get a grasp for what it all really means, and what it means for the total strength of things, what it means for the speed of things, and if it's just like its own thing in general. One thing I always come back on, one thing that's been interesting, right, is like this develop. We mentioned the skier before, and like in the beginning, it kind of seemed like ski erg was kind of like a throwaway, right? Like it's like it's the first event. It's only 1,000 meters. You can only kill yourself on it. Like you can't win it, but you can lose it. And now it's like you can lose it by not being in it. Like I didn't see this sport having this outsized uh, influence on the ski the way that it has. So now I'm trying to think for like, okay, what is it going to be that is going to move the needle the most in the future? And it seems like everybody's figured out the sleds. Like, right, your sled time can be 2 minutes or it can be 5, and that's a huge swing. So everybody needs to have a fast sled, right? Everybody's going to need to be able to manage a sled pull for the same reasons. Like it could be 3.5, it could be 7. So those are an obvious big swing where a lot of the other stations don't have that massive difference between good and serviceable. So for me, it always comes back to the run. Like I think at the end of the day, it's going to be an event that the fastest runner who can sustain this type of intensity while moving through the stations is what's going to be what it's going to be in the future, right? Like we might still see it being this variety of athlete for a while, but I think ultimately the fastest is going to be able to do it. It's easier to get better at the sled push than it is to it's easier to take your sled from a 4-minute to a 2-minute than to take your 5K from like an 18-minute to a 16-minute. Like I just feel like that's the case. So like the running is going to need to be the out is really what you're going to need to do the most, in my opinion, and like figuring out how to do the rest of it in there. And I was just having a conversation with some of the Race Brain squad, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this because now everybody does push the sled fast, and most people can manage the sled pull. The stations aren't necessarily separating the way, and that with these new sleds, right? Like these things are going to be a little bit more predictable because I think that's what they are. They're just nicer, so they're more predictable. They don't like tip over, whatever. Do you think HYROX should scale up? Should it make the stations more challenging, like how CrossFit does, right? Like CrossFit just gets harder and harder every single year, and the athletes have to move with it. Or should HYROX stay what it is and just be like, if you want to get good at this, you'd be really good at running and be able to maximize the stations? Not what will they do, but what do you think they should do?
I've had been wondering about this myself lately, actually, especially when you look at someone like Hunter, for example. It feels like he's almost maxed out on the stations. Like, how can anyone go much quicker than that? You can only do 100 lunges as so quick, or 100 wall balls, really.
Right.
So yeah, I think not necessarily for the open. I mean, but for the pro or maybe even just the elites, I think there could be a scale to go up. So it is really a separator because it feels like it's more of a running event than maybe we initially thought, and maybe initially was, because the sleds are becoming slightly easier. Like
athletes are getting stronger. That's what I think.
Oh, yeah. Well,
athletes, they're moving it faster. Like they're easier because we're better at them.
Yeah. But it doesn't feel like quite so much of a hybrid event where you need like real true strength and real true fitness anymore. It's much more skewed towards running, and that's it is what it is at the end of the day. It's not like they're saying this has to be hybrid, but I certainly think there's scope to increase the weights for the pros on the stations. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think that would be fine. Like, I think making it more challenging, where I'm on the runner side, right? So I'm okay with it turning into more of a runner event. Like, that's cool with me. But if, I like the idea of a challenge. I like the idea of this thing being like harder and harder and still attracting the bigger, stronger athletes to come in and try. But it might end up just being kind of how CrossFit is, where to be a competitor in CrossFit, you have to be a monster in strength, like to start, right? Mm-hmm. And like, if you can still be a participant in the CrossFit Open, you can make quarters, but like making the games just isn't going to happen, right? And it might just be that way for HYROX. Like, if you want to be in Elite 15, like you have to be able to run under 16 for a 5K, and you probably have to have done that as a scholastic athlete or something, like been running for 10, 15 years already. And maybe that's just what it's going to be. Because if they don't scale, so I don't know if it's going to change that much in terms of who the participants are. But I think it is just going to be whoever can run fastest. Right.
It's not like the only thing maybe against it or maybe not is that if you look at the majors this year, it's not like the winner has normally won reasonably significantly. It's not been
Mhm.
crazy close. So it's not, even if 50% of the race, there is very little that separates them, it's still not actually finished up that close. It's not like every single race is going down to the wire. So maybe it doesn't need to change. Maybe I should run the numbers and see like what the athletes' difference is on the stations in total, and then on the running in total, and see if there's, you know.
It might be more fun if it is just like everybody can just move through everything. Like the finish of the DC race for the men, there was like 7 of us doing wall balls, right?
Yeah.
And Graham comes out of nowhere, like wasn't even in the thing, and then ends up being close enough that he's able to tough it out and want it more, and he does it. Where it seems like the sleds in the past, when they were real heavy, would just blow the race up right from the start. Like half the field would be dead, and then like 1 or 2 guys would just be out crushing everybody. But maybe that's for a different event. There's going to be competitors that come through, and maybe that's the like kind of the model that the Ethics has. Have you done one of those?
No, I've not done one. I'm aware of it, but I've not done one yet.
You going to do one?
Maybe,
Thinking about it.
Yeah.
They're just in the UK, right?
Yes, I think so at the moment. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they change their movements every year, right? Like the lift and
Mm-hmm.
the like Metcon thing, they're
Mm-hmm.
different every year. So maybe that's something that I don't think HYROX will do that, but maybe some event comes along and there's going to be options for athletes. But right now, HYROX is just the one. Um, so maybe there's something down the road that does kind of scale up and does emphasize strength a little bit more. But then, like, how is it different than CrossFit? You
Exactly.
know, it gets to a
Yeah.
point where it's like this sport needs to kind of pick a lane. And right now it's endurance. And like that's what separates it from CrossFit. CrossFit already exists. We don't need easy CrossFit, you know?
Yeah. 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 And it needs to, if they want to like compete with HYROX and be on the scale of HYROX, it needs to be mass participation.
Mm-hmm.
And you start going too heavy, and then there's not too many people that can participate.
What do you think about a barbell in a HYROX event?
Uh, it depends how heavy you go.
Like something that would be as challenging as the sleds were, right? Like, and it could scale. So say like for pro, it is front squats for men between like, let me get my calculator. Let me get my calculator out here. For men, the front squat would be between 84 kilos and like 70 kilos and 84 kilos, 155 to 185. Something that's like hard. And then the deadlifts would be something similar, right? Like, and it would be like a number between 20 and 30, something that would take some time to do. What do you think?
Uh, I think it could be good. I mean, with all this, you then have the consideration, like for the company of, well, that needs to be judged, so they then need a judge on everyone doing it,
That's true.
which I think they probably hate about like the wall balls, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be someone counting those, so I think that's a factor. And then like you get into, did they go deep enough, like on the front squat and that type of stuff? So it gets, it gets very sketchy.
Just it's a manpower thing. Yeah, like having enough people to do it.
Yeah,
I think that
yeah, yeah.
judging front squats would be easier than wall balls. It's slower, and it's only one thing you're looking at, really.
Mm-hmm.
Wall balls is a little tougher.
I mean, deadlift is probably easier than front squat because there's no like
Yeah.
depth issue that you have to worry about. Yeah, could be good.
It would make it. It would take the standardization. It would up that for sure. So in the sled, just like carpet to carpet, lane to lane is different. You know, it's like just give them a barbell. That's how much it weighs. So I bang on this drum. People don't like it. People are always like, knock it off. No, we don't want it. But I think it will work. I like it.
Um, let's talk about some of your numbers. Like we touched on this last time we spoke, but as that was so long ago, where are you with your? Well, we'll start with running volume right now. What are you doing in a week?
This past block, I was up to 55-ish miles. I averaged that for about 4 weeks. And then I jumped into 70 for my like peak week, which was about 5 weeks out from DC. So if I can get my peak week about 4 to 5 weeks out from a main event, that means I'll have that capacity there throughout that. It usually will last 4-ish weeks, and I'm still running after that. I don't completely cut it out, but then I'll drop it back down to like 50s and 40s, and then I'll have I'll be a little bit more fresh for like the faster running pieces. This block, I want to get the miles up a little bit higher. I think 70 is sustainable without going crazy, and it is challenging. And that's I mean, like, that's probably it's certainly on the high end, I would imagine. What do you say? What's like the average you think for like elites? Do you ask that in the form? Do you still send that out?
Yes. Yeah.
Still collecting
Can't remember
data.
though off the top of my head. It's much less than that. That's I would say it's probably like 50K is the
Yeah,
average.
it's like 30 miles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that's a sweet spot. I think that's a good, like, that's not going to kill anybody. It's still going to get you some time on your feet. But I mean, like, you got to get faster, you got to run, you know, like there's a point where you can overdo it and it could turn into injury. But like I said, like, I think this is going to, like, this is a running event and it's more and more going to be that way. So I'm kind of, again, pushing my chips in there while, trying to be as fast as possible. And like that, for me, that's where it needs to be. Like, I know Meg runs a lot. Kent runs a lot. We're all kind of on that end, but we're probably on the upper end. I don't know if anybody runs more than us.
Do you feel like some of that is a lot of that zone 2 work, and could you do that on the bike and still feel like you're getting the benefit, or do you not feel like that would work so well?
Aerobically, you will get the benefit, 100%, but muscularly, you won't. Like, your efficiency as a runner, like just being in the running positions, is a big reason why you get faster. Like, you're using less energy, less oxygen with each step when you are efficient in these positions. And if you've ever done that, if you ever jumped your mileage, whatever, say you jump it over time, 30 to 40% from what you're doing. If you're doing something like 30 miles a week, if you're jumping at whatever, 10% each week, then you'll see, if you do just that, like, you will get faster, because the running that we're doing isn't necessarily that fast, and you'll see the speed kind of come along, like, incrementally. Your top end that you need for something like football, that won't come along, but like, your efficiency will get better and you will run faster, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, can you get the same aerobic benefits? For sure, absolutely, on the ski, on the row. So if you can't get out and do those miles, like, I think that's a good substitute for it. But when you only ski and row 1,000 meters and you run 8,000 meters, like, if you can do it healthfully, I think running is superior.
I was going to ask you about running technique. Actually, you've got like quite a. I look at some runners and they look like they've got a good technique. You're one of those. Is that something that you work on consciously? And if so, are there any like drills or anything you'd recommend for people to be working on?
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of it too. That's a good follow-up with that, because, like, it's like that idea of, perfect practice makes perfect, but really, like, perfect practice makes perfect. So, like, if you're going to spend more time running, then running well is what you should do, right? Same thing. It's like, if you're going to do wall balls, like, you're probably, like, with poor form, bad mobility, ankles are too tight, hips are too tight, you can't get that depth, like, those, you're not going to see the improvement that you want until you can move well. And you won't move well just by, like, doing more. You might move worse. So yeah, taking time. I've spent over the years. A major catalyst was that pose method, where it's kind of very much about the cadence being like 180 and having your forefoot land underneath your hips and using gravity to kind of lean forward, and that's what is the catalyst for movement. I like those principles. I don't think they kind of use it as dogma. It's like, you run like this or you don't run well at all. And that's not the case. Just a couple of the things that I do like to focus on and think about would be where that landing is. It doesn't necessarily need to be on the forefoot or the midfoot, but it needs to be close to underneath your hips. A lot of times it feels like to run faster, it's your stride length and, like, your cadence, essentially, right? Like, how much, like, ground you're going to cover. And your stride length comes from hip extension, not from like hip flexion and reaching out in front. It's actually extension. So driving your foot through the ground so that you're able to create more power. So you're going further. And I think we get that confused. We want to use stride length as like reaching out in front. And then like we're just not in an efficient position. And it's also not a fast position. So focusing where that foot is landing underneath your around your hips is really important. So kind of pulling that stride length back, I think, is very helpful. That's really the main thing that I would focus on. And then there's a ton of nuance pieces that you're better off like seeing somebody, right? Like going and getting your running form checked so they can kind of like go through it. Cause again, there could be some mobility issues. There could just be some little tactical things that could be cleaned up, but I would focus on that landing with your foot.
Okay. That's useful. All right. Thank you.
Have you put time on that? Have you tried changing run form at all?
Probably not as much as I probably should, in all honesty. I lately when I'm doing my slower stuff, I've been trying to work on like cadence a little bit more because I feel like I'm probably down at 160 maybe in reality, and just trying to increase that. And it feels weird. So I'm trying to do it gradually. So that's the one thing I've been trying to focus on.
And that will naturally pull your foot back, right? To step more, you're going to be stepping like shorter. So like then you're going to be putting yourself in a better position. That's why like that 180 deal is like generally a good rule of thumb, because it will speed you up and it will pull your foot back close to your hips. That's why they use that. And yeah, it's much more of a mental exercise than physical. You just got to think about doing it. So I had to do things like when I was changing, this is like what I like to recommend is like just do like 8 by 1 minute of perfect run form and then like relax for a minute or whatever and just like take it step by step as opposed to being like, I need to do everything perfect. And then you forget and you're like thinking about something else. You're like, oh, I'm screwing this up. Just like taking time to really like focus on it.
Do you think there's a risk of injury changing your running technique from what you've been doing for years? Does that come with risk?
I would say it mitigates risk. I think if you improve your run form, you will reduce the amount of run injuries. That was the catalyst for changing my run form. It's like I was getting very specific injuries, like in my calves and my hip flexors. And when I changed things, I probably lost some performance up front, which has come back relatively quickly. But it's come back because of the consistency that I've been able to train. Like if you're going to feel some differences, maybe your VMO, like on the inside, right above your kneecap on your quad, that's an area that can take on a little bit more. So that might feel when you're changing it, but I don't think it's too risky. No.
Okay. Should point out for people that aren't listening, I think you're one of the better runners in HYROX in reality, in the field, in case people aren't aware. Do you know where you might be for your 5 or 10K or half marathon at the moment?
I'm probably not as fast as I want to be right now, with a short block. And I'm up here at altitude, Greg. So I'm like, everything. I'm like, well, up here, not that fast. But I don't know. I could probably run 16 flat. I bet if I was at sea level, probably something like that, 1550 maybe. But I'll float between 15 flat and 16 flat, and that seems to be like a if I'm in decent shape around the year, like I can probably gut out a 16 flat.
Okay.
And so 10K would probably be, I don't know, 33, maybe dipping right under. Half marathon, 112 maybe. Would that make sense? 111 and change, 112, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. When I spoke to Hunter on here, I put up a post about this afterwards, but he said, if you find the person that can run the fastest 10K plus their 5K ski, you've probably found the winner of HYROX. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. Like that seems like an outsized weight on the running. Like I think that I would place better in that right now. If HYROX World was right now, right? I'm going in as a 12th seed. I don't think I'm going to finish there, but that's where my seed would be. if that was the race go into the season, like if we were running that and qualifying for Worlds, I'd probably be top 3. So like anecdotally, I don't believe that would. It's just like so much time to run. Like that's a lot of ground to make up on that. So I wouldn't use that as the marker now.
No. Okay. And just one other running question I've got, just for my personal knowledge, is what's your thoughts on like treadmill versus curved treadmill versus going out on the road or the track? Do you have an opinion
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So starting with like road and track, you get the benefit of the muscular damage, also the drawback of muscular damage. Like you want to get that muscular damage so that you are building back more resilient. If you're cramping in a HYROX, like you're probably not taking on the appropriate muscle damage needed to build yourself stronger. It's probably not an electrolyte thing. Maybe it is, but it's probably you're just creating too much damage running on that concrete floor. And you also get the benefit of like self-regulating your pace, right? So like you need to think about how fast you're running, which I think is definitely an advantage, especially for a more novice runner. So I think that's superior. With the caveat that like you can probably do a little bit more if you're on either one of the other treadmills. So the motorized treadmill, you're going to get a little bit more of that, a little bit less of that muscle damage, but still some. You don't get the benefit of the pacing practice, but it's going to be a little bit easier on your body. You can move it up to like incline running, which I think is very effective in terms of getting like a heart rate response. And a lot of the running in HYROX isn't incredibly fast. So putting the incline up kind of gives you that same kind of grindy feeling. It gives you the same type of like energy system response that you'd be looking for. The curved treadmill is almost no impact. It's kind of crazy. Have you spent much time on it?
Not much, no. A little. We've got one at the gym now, but I'm not tending to use it a huge amount.
So like it almost feels like you're not running. Like I've been using it quite a bit in these last couple blocks, and I will do if I do the same workout outdoors as on that treadmill, my recovery time I would need an extra day of recovery from the outdoor run than from the indoor run. So I think like if you are concerned about wear and tear and injury, I would recommend doing easy runs outside always, just so you still can get some of that pounding, your zone 2 stuff. You can just still get some of that wear and tear and doing a lot of the interval pieces on the curved treadmill. Energy system wise, it'll work the same. You'll get that heart rate response. You're just not getting that impact. It's not like hammering you the way that outdoor or even like a motorized treadmill would, where sometimes you need that. What I like about the curved treadmill is that it's like easy and it gets to speed as soon as you get on. So in terms of like HYROX work, is really nice. Like even like in my neighborhood here, it's like if I was to run outside, it's like up and down a little bit. There's some turns, so I'm not like getting this consistent effort like that you pretty much get at a HYROX, where you get that on the curved treadmill. So there's places for all of it, but I would never replace all running on either treadmill. I would want some of it done outside, but then quality sessions can be done on either treadmill. I think energy system wise will work really well.
All right. As usual. All right. This has been great. What's your hopes for the worlds when they come around?
I mean, I have like I talked about at the top, like setting big goals. I want it to be a big goal. You know, I think I can compete with anybody out there, and I want to be as prepared as possible to know that I put myself in the best position to win. You know, like I want to go there and see what I'm up against. I don't think any of these guys have anything I don't have. And it's just a matter of like facilitating that championship mindset and being able to believe in myself deep enough and truly enough that I feel like I can win. And that takes a ton of work, you know, not just the physical work is what I found. It takes like a lot of like emotional work, a lot of just like really kind of ramping myself up and like it's kind of all encompassing for me to get the absolute best out of myself. So that's my goal, is to get the most out of myself so that I can get to that starting line believing that I can win. And that's where, and it starts like today.
Okay. Awesome. All right. I often ask people on here what's their best ever sporting experience. Does one spring to mind for you? And is that partly Washington at the weekend?
It's up there, man. Recency bias, it for sure. You're talking about my own sport that I participated in, right? Not like
Yeah.
watching there or anything. Washington's definitely up there. DecaFit World Championships 2 years ago, that was huge. That was like very similar to kind of the mindset that I was able to that I was just talking about, like being all in on something as much as I can, right? Like, I'm not a 100% professional athlete, so I can't just be all in on something. But having every extra ounce of effort be pushed towards something and then having it pay off, that was something that I experienced at DECA. So I would say that is probably the top one. And yeah, this is probably my best HYROX race. I mean, this is my second time on the podium at North American Championships. Let's not forget. But this was a big one, right? This was a lot more eyeballs, a lot more attention, a lot better competition. And next time, Greg, I was rewatching, and I broke twice in the last 15 wall balls, and just like one, like that's absurd to think about doing. Like a set of 15, that's like not even that many wall balls, but I just like couldn't do it in my head, and I gave up that second place. So there's a little bit of that for this past one. I was like, it was really good. It was almost perfect, but it wasn't exactly perfect. So probably DecaFit.
Okay. All right. Nice. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for this. It's been brilliant. Well done again for what you did the weekend. If people want to follow you, find out more about you and your coaching and your podcasts and everything you're doing, yeah, tell us where to go.
For sure. Instagram, it's at Reinforced Running Rich. For training stuff, we're putting a lot of content out on like in the RMR platform. So you can check us out at rmr.training on Instagram. And podcast is RMR Training with Ryan Kent and Meg Jacoby. If you're interested more on the sports side of things, Race Brain Podcast is where we just kind of talk about the happenings of the previous week in OCR and in hybrid fitness racing. So you can check that out as well. Rich Ryan on YouTube. We're getting that back going, man. We got to get that rolling. So yeah, a bunch of places. But Instagram is probably the best. But RMR Training, check that out.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, thanks again and good luck for Nice.
Cool, Greg. Thanks, man.